I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. And yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight's movie. Tonight we watched the 2017 Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
This is week 3 of our Sam Rockwell month.
Yeah. And again, Sam Rockwell is not the main... I mean, he is a main character here, but he's not the main character. He was in a supporting role here.
He's got arguably the biggest arc.
Yeah. And Sam Rockwell, as we've
won his Oscar for this.
Yeah. Well, and as we've mentioned, he really can deliver in a supporting role.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this as I was setting up the recording. This movie in particular really has like 2-3 acts to it. Mm-hmm. I could see this having been adapted from like a stage play or something. Yeah. But yeah.
It has that quality.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us about the first time you saw this, your first impressions, the first time you saw it, and your impressions tonight?
Well, I know you're a big fan of this movie, and this was one that you wanted us to watch. And this was one that I wanted to revisit as well, because I'd only seen it the one time before. I saw it in the theater when I was watching the various Oscar nominees for the 2018 awards ceremony. And it actually occurred to me as I was rewatching this that I enjoyed it a lot more this second time. And it registered stronger for me this second time. And I think the reason why, or one of the reasons why, is I wasn't watching it in close conjunction with a bunch of other Oscar-nominated films, which is what I did last time. And I would rank this, of the 9 that was nominated that time, as probably number 5, kind of mid-range. And so there's these other films that I just enjoyed more, and I think that kind of pushed this down a little bit in my estimation. Mm-hmm. Though I do think it has some problems, which we'll likely get into. But I think the big one is it felt like the Three Billboards was announcing itself as big, important movie. Like it was really kind of going out of its way to say, I am an important movie. I am talking about important issues, about race relations and justice and despair. And it does that so overtly that it put me off a little. Even now, it kind of did, but I think it had some moments that transcended that. And it works because of that. That's kind
of my feeling on this, is that I kind of had similar feelings going into seeing it the first time. And I also saw it on like an Oscar Movies Pass. And I was kind of skeptical of it going into it, but this movie transcended that and won me over. It goes through phases, and there's moments in this movie where you dislike just about everybody in the movie, and there's moments in this movie where you admire just about everybody in the movie.
Yeah. Well, the best example of that, of course, is Sam Rockwell, who goes from basically irredeemable to a character you're actually sympathetic towards.
Yeah, though he still has his flaws.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, he's also seriously considering at the end of the movie doing some seriously bad stuff.
Which is why I was saying he still has his flaws, but yeah, so this, I guess, giving some plot overview, Francis McDormand is Mildred Hayes. Her daughter was raped and murdered, and the case hasn't been solved. And obviously, she's going through various stages of grief.
This is 7, 8, 9 months
after the murders.
Afterwards, yeah.
Yeah. And so she decides to put up some billboards, basically calling out the chief of the police department for not having solved her daughter's murder. And it's effective. It gets a lot of attention. She's interviewed by a local news station, things of that nature, but it obviously upsets the police department. And our Chief Willoughby, is played by Woody Harrelson, who's a
well-respected
and fairly likable character, though he, like everyone in this movie, has his character flaws. You know, he goes and meets with Mildred at one point, and like as a way to persuade her to take the billboards down, wants to point out that he's got terminal cancer, and but then he goes on and does things that help, and clearly loved his family, and he ends on a lovable note, creates a perfect day for his family before he commits suicide and Dixon is one of the police officers in this town who's only held on to the police force by Chief Willoughby because he firmly believes that deep down he's a decent human being, though he clearly has a checkered racial past.
Yeah.
Accused of having, well, not really accused, is pretty much admitted that he tortured
a person of color.
Yes. But he's influenced heavily by his mother, who's clearly a racist. And he allows his mother to influence him until much later in the film. And Dixon takes it as his mission to kind of, I guess, for lack of better words, get revenge on Mildred to force her to take down the billboards. You know, arresting friends, arresting her, you know.
And then that scene after the force... He's rocking out to like ABBA or something in the police department, and then one of his coworkers knocks something over in anger, and he's like, what the heck is going on around here? Finds out that the chief, who he revered, has died, goes across the street to the advertising agency where Mildred rented the billboards from. Nice enough guy that runs the place. And beats the living tar out of him.
Throws him out a window.
Out
of his second floor window.
And unbeknownst to him, the interim chief of police has arrived and is drinking a coffee outside the police station when this happens, sees it, and so he is promptly terminated thereafter.
But allowed to take his keys to the police station home, which becomes a plot point later in the movie.
And that scene, of course, has its antithesis towards the end with the bar fight scene, where he does violence, but kind of brings violence on himself in order to get possibly incriminating evidence on a suspect.
Which is the story arc of his character, you know, Dixon. But the guy that he beats up in the advertising agency is Red Welby, played by Caleb Landry Jones, who's, you know, just a quirky character in this movie.
He looks like a guy from the Ozarks. And I love this town that they shoot in. It's very southern Missouri.
He was in Twin Peaks.
Ah, yeah. He was married to Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah, and Francis McDormand's character, Mildred, her son is played by...
Lucas Hedges.
You also have Željko Ivanek, Amanda Warren. Yeah, there's some other good bit parts in this
Abbie
movie.
Cornish is in it. Samara Weaving.
Darrell Britt Gibson in a role that you liked.
Yeah, Darrell Britt Gibson is a guy that helps put up the billboards. And I was commenting when we were watching this that this is like the golden bit part. Because I think he actually shows up later in the film.
Yeah, I think he has a total of 3, maybe 4 scenes. So.
Yeah, and he probably has about a dozen lines. But he's memorable. He has this great conversation with Sam Rockwell, who drives by the billboards, sees them, and is instantly put off by it. And so he ends up flagging down this guy who's helping to put up the billboards, and he asks him, so what is this? Advertising, I guess. Yeah, but advertising for what? Turns back, looks at the billboards. Something obscure? And we should probably go over what the billboards say, which is... so the billboards say, raped while dying, still no arrest, how come Chief Willoughby?
Yes. And it's just to call attention to her daughter's case. And she has gone to the advertising agency before crafting the language for this to clarify what she can and can't say on the sign. And has had these billboards put up, but it's on a road that nobody really travels, you know. But she's paying for it just simply to get the attention of the police department. And it works. And, yeah.
And Willoughby's got a good point. He basically says, of course I want to solve this, but what else can I do? I mean, we've tested the DNA. It's not coming back in any criminal databases anywhere. There's no witnesses. It's been, 9 months. I don't really have anywhere to go with it.
Yeah.
And when he kills himself, he does leave behind letters for various people, including his wife, including Sam Rockwell's character, and including her.
Mildred Hayes.
Yeah, Mildred. And he says that, sometimes you get these cases that they just dead end. And then 5 years down the road, somebody overhears somebody bragging in a bar in a jail cell, and it's just solved by pure chance. And I really hope that's what happens with your daughter. And that is something that kind of informs
what happens
later in the film when
Dixon
overhears a conversation in the bar between these people and about a guy who is in somewhat coded language, bragging about raping someone who died.
Well, and the circumstances sound similar. Like, the guy, his friend asks him if the girl was hot, and he says, "Well, she heated up after the gasoline, was poured on her." And
this same guy was in a scene earlier where she was harassing Mildred in the gift shop where she works.
Yeah.
And even though the new chief contacted the commanding officer, this guy who testified that he was not in the country at the time of that crime, I'm not entirely sure that's true.
But
I think
DNA
he might be
match.
the guy. Well, yeah.
So
I don't know. Something's up, though. Something's fishy, because I feel like he has some kind of a connection, even if he didn't participate, like he was aware of it. Or possibly he was just harassing Mildred because it hit a little too close to home, and he had done something similar.
Yeah. Or had done something like that while he was overseas.
Yeah.
There was atrocities committed overseas.
Yes, and the burning thing, you think of the oil wells.
Yeah, what did you think of the ending of this film?
When they're going to Idaho?
Yes.
I think I liked it. I liked that. I don't necessarily like that these people were going to go and possibly murder somebody on their own, but as an ending to this movie, I think it worked.
Let's back it up even a little bit further. Let's back it up to the point of the phone call where Dixon calls Mildred to inform her that the guy from Idaho isn't the murderer. What do you think of the ending from there on? I have some specific thoughts in mind that I'll get to.
You go ahead with your thoughts.
When he makes that phone call and he's sitting there with the shotgun, in my mind, I'm not sure, I'm thinking because at one point he's threatened to blow his mother's head off. And so as he's sitting there with the shotgun, I'm going, oh no, this might be it. Like, I wasn't sure if he was going to kill his mom and kill himself after telling her that guy wasn't the guy. And then the conversation goes well, and so he decides, maybe my mom is racist and I just need to go, and this is my way to get out of the house, whatever you'd like to envision, that he doesn't go home after that, things like that. But I felt like he could have gone either way in that moment. That he could have killed his mother and himself right then, or he could have gone with Mildred. So.
And there's been some comment that this film, obviously, it deals with racial issues, though it's not really the focus of the film. Some people weren't big fans of the way that this film handled that, and that maybe they let Sam Rockwell that character off too easy, which I think you can argue.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can see that.
Because he's done horrible things, and yet they allow him to be redeemed.
Well, and he does horrible things in the context of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. There's no.
Even his redemption is in the
Willoughby.
context of horrible things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Red Willoughby is a decent dude, because when
yeah.
So he ends up. So Mildred burns the police station down when she's angry, and Dixon is in there reading the letter that had been left for him. Yeah, and so he doesn't realize what's going on until the fire's made a fair amount of progress, and so he has to go through the flames to get out, and he ends up in the hospital in the same room with Red, who he had beaten up and thrown out a window. And at first, Red just sees, it's a burn victim. And he's being very nice to him. And this moves Dixon. And so Dixon just has to say, I'm Dixon. I'm sorry that I did this to you. And, how upset that makes Red. But Red still gives him the orange juice that he promised him.
The bendy straw.
With the bendy straw. And, this is a guy that's kind of a loser guy, but he's also very redeemable. And I guess that's the kind of the thread that runs through this. A question I was going to ask, and which I think was an issue I had with this film, especially the first time I saw it, which is, what's the point? What is the thesis statement of this movie? What is it trying to tell us?
To me, it's about a combination of grief as well as just character arc. Like, a moment doesn't define a person.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Someone's worst moment doesn't define them. Mm-hmm. But it's also very much about the mother's grief.
Yeah. It's about what do you do with pain. So there's a moment very early on where Mildred goes into the advertising agency to rent the billboard space, and there's this beetle on its back that she writes. And I think that is a little thematic moment. It's people trying to make this impossible situation right.
I mean, there's so many things, inappropriate moments with Mildred. She's a mother going through unimaginable grief. Her daughter was raped and murdered. How do you have to just give someone space and time.
Yeah.
And this town does not want to give her sufficient space and time. I actually loved the scene when she tells the father off.
The minister father one, or the
minister
the
father.
biological father?
No, well,
she tells a lot of people off over the course of this
the
movie.
dentist. But yeah, when the minister comes to her home, that is such an inappropriate moment. That minister never should have been there. Clearly, he's only there for the arc of this movie. But yeah, he never should have been there. Those circumstances shouldn't have existed. But that's the type of thing that does happen in small town America, as both of us have experienced many years in our past. But
so this is a movie about serious subjects, and it's about pain.
Yeah.
It's also really funny.
Yes, it is.
Some of the dialogue in this is just great and memorable, and it manages to walk that line between the comedy and the tragedy.
When Mildred Hayes is driving by the billboards after the chief dies, or after the billboards have been burned, and the reporter is talking about, oh, I hope this puts an end to this thing. Mildred drives by and says, this didn't put an end to shit, you f***ing retard. This is just the start. Why don't you put that on your Good Morning Missouri makeup broadcast? I mean, obviously I'm going to have to edit that out.
You've given yourself quite the editing challenge.
I'll just have to delete that one, but yeah, or, I mean, this one's not funny, but a highlight, this is the final conversation between Mildred and her daughter Angela with Robbie in the house. It's the last time they talk before the daughter's murdered. And the daughter Angela says, why are you never on my side, Robbie? Robbie says, I'm always on your side when you're not being a naughty word. Mildred and Angela both say, hey. Mildred says, there will be no more C words in this house. You got that, mister? And Robbie says, what? Are you moving out?
And we should mention that the daughter, who has one or two scenes, just the flashback scene, is played by Catherine Newton, who meant nothing to me at the time this movie came out, but is in now like everything.
Yeah, Big Little Lies, Detective Pikachu, which I know Nate was a big fan of.
Indeed.
John Hawkes plays the biological father, Charlie. Samara Weaving plays Penelope, which is his new wife or girlfriend?
19-year-old girlfriend who worked at the zoo. And she is great.
And she is the punchline of a number of jokes.
She is, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of this woman. I'm obviously sorry in the film, but this is an absolutely stunning woman. She is the niece of Hugo Weaving, the actor from the Matrix films. And they play her looks down a bit in this, and she plays this kind of bimbo, but like a really good-hearted bimbo.
Yeah.
And she has some hilarious lines, and you just kind of even Mildred grows to like her, even though she's the 19-year-old girlfriend of the ex-husband that she's really mad at.
A couple other funny lines. Mildred Hayes walks into the police station and says, hey, bleephead. Dixon says, what? And the desk sergeant says, don't say what, Dixon, when she comes in here calling you a bleep. And then she asks Dixon, she says, how's it going in the blank torturing business, Dixon? He says, it's person of color torturing business these days, if you want to know. And I didn't torture nobody.
All this anger, man. It just begets greater anger.
Yeah.
Did she really say begets?
Yeah. From Richard Dinklage.
Yeah. Or Peter Dinklage. And then they have that little conversation about it. It's like, did you really say begets? It's like, yeah, I got it. I didn't make it up myself. I got it.
I read it off of a bookmark in a book that I was reading
about polio.
Wait, is that the one? The one about the horses? Polo. Oh, Polo. And then at the beginning of the movie, when Mildred Hayes goes into the advertising agency and is clarifying what she can and can't put on the billboard, she says, what's the law on what you can and can't say on a billboard? I assume you can't say nothing defamatory. You can't say blank, piss, or the C word. That right? And Red Welby says, or anus. Well, I think I'll be all right then.
What's the rule about what we can and can't say on this podcast?
You can say it. I'll just blank it. Or when they're at the house and when Charlie and Mildred are at the house with their son, and Charlie, is finally broken down and having emotion, and says to Mildred, he says, those billboards aren't going to bring her back, Mildred. Mildred replies, well, neither is screwing 19-year-olds, Charlie. We had 2 official complaints about the billboards, so actually, from who? The lady with a funny eye and a fat dentist. Give me the file on Angela Hayes. A lady with a funny eye?
If you get rid of every cop with vaguely racist leanings, then you have 3 cops left, and all of them are going to hate the homosexuals. So what are you going to do,
Or after Dixon throws Red out the window, he says, see, Red, I got issues with white folks, too. One question that we had was this based on something that actually happened? And the writer-director Martin McDonagh was inspired to write the movie after seeing billboards about an unsolved crime while traveling, quote, somewhere down in the Florida, Georgia, Alabama corner. And the basis of this story is from actual events in Vidor, Texas, just outside Beaumont, Texas. The police ignored both the facts and the parents of a poor girl who was murdered in 1991 by an alleged hometown hero from old family money. As the police have done nothing, the billboards are still up on Interstate 10.
Mm. One of the themes in this film that I think has only grown more relevant since then, cancel culture.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, that's a whole other kettle of fish, but how angry people get at certain opinions just being stated. And they just can't process it. Like, this lady has the perfect right to put these billboards up. It's not hurting anybody. But it just gets under the skin of so many people. I mean, her dentist attempts unnecessary dental surgery on her because he's just angry.
Yeah. The way she's treating the chief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and I hate to say this, but, when you're in a more countrified area, I think that tolerance level is lower. And it's just an emotional thing.
There is no town in Missouri named Ebbing.
But there should be.
And this movie was filmed in the small mountain town of Sylvan, North Carolina, which is why much of this looked probably so familiar.
Yeah.
Because we both, at one point, lived just over the border.
Mm. Though it does feel like that part of Missouri, which I've been to forever ago. I went to a place called Eureka.
Mm-hmm.
Eureka Springs, Missouri, which is a tourist town. And like Sam Rockwell's mother lives in a house, and Sam Rockwell lives in this house on a hillside. And it just evoked that area to me. But, obviously that applies to large portions of the South.
One thing you mentioned briefly earlier, the movie that Dixon, Sam Rockwell's mother, is watching with Donald Sutherland and his, quote, dead girl, is Don't Look Now from 1973, directed by Nicholas Roeg. This movie was also alluded to in Martin McDonagh's feature film The Bruges from 2008. In this film, Francis McDormand's character parallels Donald Sutherland's character in that they are both driven by the guilt and grief of losing their daughter. Woody Harrelson seems to have thoroughly enjoyed the filming of this movie.
This is a good part for him.
Yeah. Before I get into that one, tangent, did you know Francis McDormand is married to Joel Coen?
Yeah, I know that.
I didn't know that.
Do you know how they met?
No.
The Coen brothers' first film from 1983-ish is called Blood Simple, and that starred Holly Hunter. And Holly Hunter and Francis McDormand were roommates at the time that they made that film.
Wow. That's interesting. So while they were filming this in the town in North Carolina, they routinely invited locals to come down and watch the filming of outdoor scenes. And it was common for there to be like 100+ people around when they were filming. And they told the locals they were welcome as long as they weren't interrupting. And apparently it was common during the breaks for the actors to go around and sign autographs and take pictures with the locals. But Woody Harrelson in particular said was used his breaks from shooting to sign the autographs and take pictures. But then during an extended break one day, he played an impromptu guitar performance at the music store that is next to the police station set.
And I can see him liking it out there in North Carolina, up in the back southern woods, because a lot of people growing pot out there.
Yeah. Well, what else do you have to say about this movie? Kind of wrapping up.
Well, wrapping up, as I mentioned early on, I enjoyed it more this time because it was divorced from other very intelligent fare seeking my attention.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it works. It's definitely not a perfect film, and there's some issues with the way it handles racial issues and a few other things. But it's just got enough really affecting dramatic moments in it, and it's just got that weird sense of humor that kind of leavens the proceedings.
Yeah.
So it works. I don't want to say it works as comedy because it's not a comedy, but the comedy works, and it works as drama.
Yeah.
And it feels even more relevant now than it did a few years ago because we've continued to be just what's the word I'm looking for? On thin ice with each other. And this is about a community having to realize they have to live with each other. And that's an important message.
So this movie was nominated for 7 Oscars. Do you recall what the 7 were?
Well, I was nominated for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was nominated for Best Director.
No.
Nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Rockwell. Best Actress for Francis McDormand that I forgot she won.
Yes. Yep.
Best Screenplay?
Yes.
Something to do with cinematography?
Film editing.
The soundtrack.
Yep. That is the other one. You're actually missing one more.
Oh, okay.
There was 2 nominations for Best Supporting Actor from this film.
Oh.
The second was for Woody Harrelson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, Frances McDormand won the Oscar for Best Actress in a Leading Role. Sam Rockwell won for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role. It was nominated for Best Motion Picture. Woody Harrelson was nominated for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role. Best Achievement in Music Written for Motion Pictures Original Score. Best Original Screenplay, and Best Achievement in Film Editing. So, how would you rate this film? How did you rate it after your first viewing?
I gave it 3.5.
Oh, yeah?
Which was more than I remembered giving it. I just reread the review today. I would still give it 3.5. I think I'm torn between 7 and 8 stars. I think I'd probably up it to 8.
I would give this 8 out of 10 on the 10-star scale. And I think you're pretty close on the 4-star scale. So
you'd give it 3.5?
I don't do too many half stars on the 4-star scale unless it's 2.5. So 3.5, to me that's splitting hairs. But I'd give it 8 on the 10-star scale. So, any other wrapping up thoughts on this one?
This was good. I'm glad I got a chance to rewatch it.
Yeah.
And I may have to watch it again the next time I'm going up to Idaho the next day.
Yeah. Just so that you can say you're going to Idaho the next day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You'll have to make sure you make some phone calls, so you can tell people you're going to Idaho the next day. Yeah. You want to borrow my shotgun? Just put it in the trunk of your car while you go?
I was stopping... a couple years ago, I was going up to Boise, and I stopped at a rest area, and this guy got out of a truck, and he was carrying this big shotgun, and it freaked me out for a moment. I'm like, what the is he gonna? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm back in Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel there's been several times I felt kind of funny when I'm getting ready to go to the gun range, and I'm in my community walking out to my vehicle carrying guns and going, this probably doesn't fit in too well in this community. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. And I'm back.
So, the star of Home Alone, when he is fixing loose tiles in the bathroom, he becomes Macaulay Culkin.
Wow.
And when Brenda's song is out of the house... he becomes Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone 2.
How long did it take you to come up with that?
It's been slow at work.
That's probably the punchline of the episode.
So I was telling you that I was watching that For the Love of Spock documentary that's about the character Spock. It's about the actor Leonard Nimoy, and it was directed by Adam Nimoy, who's Leonard Nimoy's son.
Yeah.
And Leonard Nimoy was married 2 times. He was married first to the woman who was the mother of his 2 children, and they were married for 32 years. And then they got divorced, and he remarried a few years later, and he was with this other woman until he died. Now, Adam Nimoy was married 3 times. He was first married to the mother of his 2 children, and they divorced after 18 years. And then he married another woman who got diagnosed with ultimately terminal cancer 4 months after they got married. And then several years after this movie came out, he married for a 3rd time to the actress Terry Farrell from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. She's best known for 2 roles. That's as Jadzia Dax on Deep Space Nine, and for being part of the cast of the Ted Danson sitcom Becker. Now, she left the cast of Becker after, I think, the 4th season, and so the writers brought in a new love interest for Ted Danson's character, played by Nancy Travis. Now, Nancy Travis and Ted Danson were the parents of the baby in 3 Men and a Baby, which was directed by Leonard Nimoy.
Wow.
And that is some weird kind of messed up version of the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Does this have anything to do with why you watched 3 Men and a Baby this week?
No, I watched that before I watched the Leonard Nimoy documentary.
Does this have anything to do with why you watched the Leonard Nimoy?
I've been watching a lot of Leonard Nimoy lately.
Yeah, I know.
Because I've been watching the original Star Trek.
Yeah. That's a strange coincidence, though. Yeah.
Everything's connected.
Yeah.
5G, COVID. I'm just saying.
Wow. He went there. All you needed to do now was throw in QAnon.
Who says I didn't?
Was Leonard Nimoy part of the child sex pedophile
Leonard
ring?
Nimoy is Q. He's gone underground. Faked his death.
Wow.
I think we've milked this about as far as we should milk it.